4 metrics to consider when measuring ROI from organic search with Charlie Whitworth. The In Search SEO podcast is brought to you by Similarweb, helping you build better SEO strategies with digital intelligence, insights, and data. Hey, it's David. Is it possible to measure the ROI from your organic search performance? And if so, what metrics should you be using? That's what we're discussing today with an experienced digital marketing expert who has a decade of technical SEO and content marketing experience. He's the former organic search director at Bank Digital and founder at Whitworth SEO. A warm welcome to the In Search SEO podcast, Charlie Whitworth.
Hello.
Hey Charlie, thanks so much for joining us. We can find Charlie over at whitworthseo.com. So today, Charlie, you're sharing 4 metrics to consider when measuring ROI from organic search, starting off with number 1, accurate forecasting.
Yeah, so I think the forecasting part, is the most reliable way to measure the ROI. I think one of the considerations is whether or not you're working on an e-commerce project, or if you're not working on an e-commerce project, the ROI can be really difficult to gauge because you don't really have that sales data. But when you've got, conversion, AOV and sales data, then I feel like you can project that ROI quite reliably. Simple equation of investment minus, converted leads and then taking away that investment level. So yeah, for e-commerce, I wouldn't say it's easy, but there's tangible metrics there you can use to make that calculation. I've developed a fairly manual process over the years of, very much in terms of increased traffic sessions, that click-through rate, conversion rate, and then using AOV, you can kind of project that. And then obviously you'll get your final figures from performance. But yeah, where it does get tricky is when you don't have that conversion data and you're working with, say, like a brochure site or it's inquiries rather than actual sales, where it can get a little bit more difficult. But yeah, accurate forecasting is still short. It is still at the crux of that ROI.
And why is it generally easier for e-commerce? Is it because sales cycles tend to be shorter, or is it because you've got much more data?
Just much more data. No forecast is perfect, and I shouldn't have thought any ROI modeling is completely perfect to the pound. But it will give you certainly an indication of if you are getting return on investment, and to some extent, to what extent. But yeah, if you're not working in e-commerce, and it's, as I say, if you're measuring inquiries, you still don't know after that inquiry how the company monetized that. The inquiry could fall flat at some point through the business, or it could just be that inquiry is a kind of a weak or a duff lead. So at least with e-com, it's money in the bank from that session.
And how does this relate to intent? Do you have different keyword phrases that you map to different levels of intent, different stages of intent, and therefore perhaps presume that they're earlier or later on in the funnel?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the things that GA4 definitely has helped with, is being able to segment that intent in terms of the landing page that came through, and you've got cross-channel as a kind of as a source now in GA, which helps with that. But yes, certainly, traffic coming through to a blog article, it's coming through an informational intent search, you can look at lifetime value and if they've come back and converted at a later stage. But certainly if you're looking at ROI from organic, we're looking at those transactional intent queries. Yeah. And obviously that's a lot easier to segment these days.
And what are your general thoughts on attribution nowadays?
Yeah, again, I think GA4, a lot of people have loved to hate it. I think I'm starting to get used to it now. And in terms of attribution, there's a lot more functionality there. But again, if we're looking at ROI from SEO versus, say, paid, for instance, this cross-channel metric has helped a lot in terms of being able to work out, first click, last click. And I think, again, I don't think any attribution modeling is perfect, but certainly compared to back in the day, there was a lot more functionality there available, which is one of my other metrics to look at is if you're able to get organic performance to a point where you're relying less on paid search, that's got to contribute to that ROI modeling for organic, because if you're spending less on your clicks, because you're getting that free traffic, as it were, from organic, then that's part of the ROI from SEO, because you're obviously not having to spend so much on paid ads.
And the second metric that you're keen to focus on is considering lifetime value. So do you do that for every type of business?
So again, coming from a kind of e-commerce background, that lifetime value is a lot easier to segment and to monitor. So no, I mean, I'm sure it is possible for other kind of platforms, but lifetime value from an e-commerce perspective is a lot easier to gauge. That's where the ROI becomes a lot trickier for non-e-commerce campaigns, I believe, because, trying to track that lifetime value of a customer that say is coming through an informational search, they may have made an inquiry on the site, and then you get that black hole. I feel like that's really hard to determine. So no, it would probably just be for e-commerce campaigns where I'm looking at that.
And I've had a few conversations recently about the importance of having decent conversations with the C-suite. So SEO managers being able to actually talk in the language that the C-suite appreciates. And I guess lifetime value could be that. I mean, are the C-suite open to lifetime value when trying to define the value of an SEO activity, or would they rather see immediate ROI?
But I think it depends on the brand and how kind of how savvy and how supportive of the channel that client are. I've got clients who are very, very big on the lifetime value and laser focusing on that, and they'll appreciate that. Let's get the sessions in and let's nurture that customer. But in terms of the C-suites, I haven't had a lot of experience working with the C-suite kind of clients. So in terms of their attitude to that, I'm not sure. But from the kind of mid-range e-commerce clients that I work with, that lifetime value piece is something that they're very keen on nurturing. Yeah.
And briefly, I mean, how do you calculate lifetime value? Do you, for instance, look at a previous cohort of similar users and use that as a way to determine what the likely lifetime value is of a new user?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's where the collaboration between teams, I mean, data analysts are usually on hand to help with that. As I say, GA4's functionality now does allow a lot more accurate analysis of that. And obviously your attribution modeling has to be spot on, whether you're not using native stuff in GA4 or if you're using, something like Supermetrics or something, another third-party tool to help with that attribution modeling. So yeah, I think the cohort aspect of GA4 now compared to UA is obviously a lot more, is a lot more insightful.
Is there a tendency just to build bespoke attribution models nowadays, or is it reasonable to start off with a standard model?
I think out of the box on GA4, it gives you some good insight. And I think that's where SEO, need to collaborate with data analysts and data scientists and to really kind of get stuck into that data. I think out of the box on a fairly medium to respectable level data set, it does give you good insight. But if you're talking about hundreds of thousand URLs, big traffic websites, I think it's reasonable then to want to manipulate that data a little bit more and not just use the out of the box reports.
And the third metric that you want to focus on is cash saved from paid. What does that mean?
So yeah, just kind of what I touched on previously, really. So yeah, you've got your very simple ROI metrics of what we're spending and then what we're making from SEO or organic in terms of sales and revenue, which can give you a quite crude top line view of ROI. But there's a few things that I've mentioned that it's really hard to attribute, but are worth bearing in mind. One of them is that cash saved and paid. So if organic visibility and traffic to commercial pages organically, because you're suddenly ranking first, second, third in the organic search is so strong that you then don't need to invest in those clicks from a paid search perspective, that increases the ROI of SEO because you are not only getting extra traffic and sales through the organic channel, but you're not spending as much on paid ads. So that obviously shifts that ROI from paid search to organic, which saves it there. And then a few of the others that I mentioned, which is like investment in things like digital PR and tools and things where it's really, really hard to then say, right, well, that money has chipped away at that ROI because you don't know exactly what impact that's had. How valuable is a link, a backlink, or how valuable is a piece of coverage? It all helps that SEO effort and could well be promoting your rankings. But that's where a few of those things become a little bit blurred, really, and become quite hard to attribute perfectly. But in terms of the cash saved and paid, I think that's an important one. I've had that conversation with a lot of clients where they're like, well, we're first and second now for these terms. We don't need to be paying for those clicks, which, has saved them quite a lot of money.
And has that been good advice? I mean, is there value in appearing first in paid and first in organic as well?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the clients are waiting and be like, right, let's turn that off. And a lot of the time it hasn't been prudent. I think, again, it depends on the spend and what it is. If it's a fairly marginal gain in terms of the spend, then is it worth risking it? But if that CPC is considerable, then, it's definitely worth considering. In my experience, if you're first in, and if they've had that first click on paid and last click on organic, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Clients usually happy to get that conversion. But again, it does depend on the CPCs for that particular keyword, doesn't it?
So in your experience, are SEOs currently working more effectively with paid search teams, or is there a bit of a struggle, a bit of a headbutting sometimes still between the two teams?
I think it's still exactly how it always has been, which is we love to collaborate. And, I usually get on very well with paid search teams. I mean, one of my best friends are paid search, and I work alongside them a lot of the time. And, we do just love to have that conversation with clients where SEO and PPC can live harmoniously. But at the end of the day, if we're going to be reducing their click spend or their activity or vice versa, then, there's going to be sometimes it's going to get a little bit contentious. But I think we all like to collaborate, but we all like to make sure that it doesn't impact our activity too much. But, sometimes it can be an awkward conversation.
Something else that you said that I found quite interesting was you're talking about the value of links, and it made me think perhaps outreach teams need to do a better job with actually determining the lifetime value of driving traffic and more prominent rankings to a particular piece in order to actually define the amount of money that's appropriate to pay for a piece on another site. Let's not necessarily say links, but should outreach teams do a better job of actually considering lifetime value before deciding how much budget they should be spending?
I think so. It's hard to say that in a critical way because, a lot of the digital PR guys I work with are amazing and great at getting coverage, and they've come from a more of a PR background, but they want to see that SEO impact because, that's what they like to deliver. But it's such a hard thing to determine to say, right, this piece of coverage on X site is worth this amount of money to you. Because I think a lot of the digital PRs are heart and not SEOs. Therefore, they're interested in that coverage and the direct traffic and the brand awareness. And rightly so, because that's what works. Perhaps that's actually more the onus on the SEOs to work with the digital PRs to say, right, actually, this piece of coverage has been really effective SEO wise and help them to determine that. But something that I've struggled with over the last year from running my own agency is educating the client on the ROI of digital PR. Because I'll say to them, right, we've got the site technically sound, we've mapped the content, we've got an authority issue here, we need to get going with digital PR. And when they ask me how about the ROI from that, because I'm not a digital PR expert, I find that conversation really difficult. I'm sure the bigger agencies out there have got a really good out-of-the-box kind of solution or piece of commentary to try and tell that story. And we know that it does provide ROI. ROI is not that it doesn't, it's just how much and how can you quantify that? Which can be quite a hard conversation to have with a client that doesn't have, 10 grand a month to spend on digital PR campaigns, but needs that authority.
Yeah, it depends on obviously the piece of content that's being produced, but where in the overarching kind of content marketing or content cycle that content piece sits in order to actually be able to actually determine a helpful ROI then, I guess.
Yeah, and it's for how long as well. How long does that link or that piece of coverage have impact for? As SEOs will say, as long as that link is live, it will be passing some level of authority to the site. But as we see now, links that aren't necessarily crawlable, they're buried in a site, they get old or stale, will start to have less impact. So that ROI from that piece of coverage then starts to wane. So with all those factors, it becomes an almost impossible thing to put an actual number on. Apart from that, we know it does provide ROI, because without the coverage and links, then you would hit that glass ceiling, wouldn't you?
And the fourth area that you want to focus on is get granular. So what do you mean by that?
So yeah, another way to gauge the ROI is sometimes to look on a project based. So I've worked on this basis with a few clients. It does have its downsides because sometimes you'll implement something and it won't have the impact that you thought, or Google's taking a long time to honor it, or it just could be a tactic that's become less effective. But for instance, if I'm doing a big URL restructure for a client, they'll ask me, right, well, as a project, what kind of impact is this going to have? And, you can base it on when you've implemented it from previous campaigns. You can base it on, your understanding of the algorithm at the time. But you can project, do a bit of forecasting based on that piece of work you're going to do to say, right, well, I would expect on a very rough level for this to have this impact on rankings, and then start to project do some forecasting and project some ROI on that basis. That can help to get things through, can help, to get sign off so that the client will actually go ahead with that implementation as well. So instead of looking site wide, right, SEO is going to have this amount of impact on your site ROI wise, it can be easy to break it down into those kind of big win kind of implementations that we all know have impact that we know over the years. So yeah, looking at URL structure, looking at title tags, looking at content mapping or content cluster implementation, looking at resolving cannibalization. Perhaps you can look at those individual things and start to project some ROI from those individual tasks.
Well, let's finish off with
the Pareto Pickle.
Pareto says that you can get 80% of your results from 20% of your efforts. What's one SEO activity you would recommend that provides incredible results for modest levels of effort?
Well, I think, I'm going to say it's one I've spoken about before, but on large scale sites, having a look at your keyword cannibalization and perhaps looking at a prune of your content for engagement. Have you got content competing with each other? Have you got too much content on the same topic? Well, the core updates recently have focused on, especially through the helpful content update and the recent core updates on that EAT and quality. So I think reviewing content that's competing and content experience and looking at utilizing that for the recent core updates is a quick win.
Okay. And in terms of content that's competing, identify the piece of content that I guess you don't want ranking and ideally put 301 that to the other piece of content.
So it's not a one size fits all solution. Sometimes that content may want to stay on the site. The client may want to keep that on the website for whatever reason, but you don't want it competing with another piece of content. In that instance, I would no index it. If you know it's historic and it's weak and it's fairly sparse and lower quality, then yeah, I would just 301 it and get it off the site. So yeah, for low quality, spammy or over-optimized historic stuff, let's get it redirected. If it's borderline, but it's competing with other content and creating that cannibalization, then just whack a no index tag on there.
I've been your host, David Bain. You can find Charlie Whitworth over at whitworthseo.com. Charlie, thanks so much for being on the In Search SEO podcast.
No problem.
And thank you for listening. Check out all the previous episodes and sign up for a free trial of the Similarweb platform over at Similarweb.com.